Welcome to the Embodiment podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with specialists from around the world. I'm your host for today, Mark Walsh. So this is one of the presentations from the Embodiment Conference. So I guess many of you know the Embodiment Conference was a huge event over 2 weeks where over 140 speakers led presentations on embodiment. Now, a lot of these were visual. Some of them were more kind of talking based though. We thought, you know what, we could give some of these away as part of the podcast. So listening to this, you may hear references to questions or things in the chat. We've tried to select ones that they're not demonstrating too much visually, obviously. If it piques your interest, you can always see, you can always buy the full package of Embodiment Conference recordings, a bit of an encyclopedia, actually. Embodiment Netflix, someone was calling it. And that is available if you just Google the Embodiment Conference. I'm sure you'll be able to find a link to that. This is one of the speakers, and as I say, it's a bit different. May or may not be me interviewing them, presenting it. It's mostly them just doing their thing, and excuse the sort of occasional references to comments or visual demonstrations. And it just seemed like a lot of the speakers were extremely kind of high-level people, and it's stuff we wanted to make available. So here it is.
We've got Philip Shepherd. He's a thinker who is engaged with radical wholeness. And what he's kind of focused on is bringing our thinking down from the rational head, the kind of overthinking that we dominate our culture, down into the body, so he can really get in touch with our embodied intelligence. And today he's going to be doing a presentation for us called The Forgotten Harmony. There's going to be some time for some questions, and then an exercise, and then some more questions. So I think it's going to be a hugely exciting session. So I'm just going to stop there and pass us straight over to Philip.
And away we go. So I'm going to give a sense of the shape of it. I'd like to give an overview of my understanding of embodiment, and then from that set up how our disembodiment is a major contributor to the ecological crisis we feel trembling around us. So I've got some PowerPoints, and this is the first one, just to set it up.
Oh, I need to actually share this.
Yeah, I just have the PowerPoints as a way. I'm hoping to help everyone really lodge these questions, these points in their mind. So, what is true embodiment? I think it's a really crucial question for us. My take on that is that being fully embodied means that your full intelligence is brought into coherence. So what we tend to do is we segregate the intelligence of the head from the body and ask the head to go it alone and sort out all our issues. Your full intelligence includes the body's intelligence, not in an either-or fashion. It's a unified intelligence of your being, which also includes the mindful presence of the world, the humming intelligence in which we live. So I'd really like to distinguish that from listening to the body or being aware of the body. I don't think either of those states is embodiment, because they're divided states. You're in your head listening to the body as though your body were in another room and you were putting your ear to the wall, separating you from the body. For me, embodiment is being aware of the world from the body. It's about listening to the world through the body, which means that the center of your awareness has dropped down into the body. And when you're listening to the world through the body attunes you to the present. The body's intelligence never dissociates from the present. And then it's worth asking ourselves, what is the present? And I think to take stock of what is the present, I think it helps to understand the present as the crest of a wave that contains within it all the currents of everything that has ever been and the potential of everything that will ever unfold. So in that sense, everything exists in the present. And by attuning to the present, which is the body's métier, you attune to the whole. And wholeness is our one reality. Nothing exists apart from wholeness. So in that sense, I experience and feel the body as a resonator. And it's not to say, with listening to the body or being aware of the world through the body, it's not to say the body doesn't require inner work. The way I see it is the body gets filled with cotton balls and its resonance is impaired. And that's what our culture does to us. And I've actually got a crystal bowl to demonstrate. So, the body hums to the present. And here's what happens in our culture. The cotton balls get stuffed into the body, and then this is happening. And the present is running through the body, and it's lost its resonance. And then we even cease to believe that the present exists in a holistic way. We feel its bits and pieces, but it's a huge challenge for us to actually feel the body, feel the present in its wholeness. It's difficult for us to feel the self in its wholeness. So, we, as a culture, we've begun to recognize the importance of the body, and we've overcome our cultural dissociation of the mind-body split by speaking of the body-mind. My take on that is that we are a rampantly self-conscious culture. We are in a self-supervisory state. We have the focus on the self. So to stop at the body-mind is to impair our relationship with the present and is to impair our full embodiment. So I speak of the body world. My experience in the moment is an experience of the body world. And just as you can't divide mind from body, how can you divide the body-mind from the world itself? We are born of relationship and carried by relationship. So my experience is that of a body world. Without that bridge, without that recognition of the body world, we take on the task of organizing the present. And we're so busy organizing the present that we miss the opportunity to feel the present organizing us. So true embodiment, for me, carries you into a sense of self that doesn't depend on separation, which is the sense of self we're used to. It roots you in a sense of self that depends on the present. That brings us to the question of why is embodiment so challenging for us? And I think if we can address that, we can get a sense of how to take on this journey back to embodiment. There is a wound in our culture that's been inflicted on all of us that separates our thinking from our being. This has been inculcated in us it's the primary lesson that is taught by our education system. So reflect on what it means to a child to be told to sit still in this chair and suppress the body's intelligence and fill the head with ideas and be able to regurgitate those to excel at the academic standard of success. To suppress the body's energy and stifle it is to suppress the body's intelligence. And we actually come to believe that we can think more clearly if we sort of dissociate from all that noise of the body and just apply our heads to whatever issue is there. That noise of the body is the body's intelligence. The body thinks in sensation. And to dull ourselves to that is to dull ourselves not just to the body's vast intelligence, but it's subtle attunement to the world around us. So our culture enforces this wound in us. Any culture is just a story. We habituate to that story. We come to mistake the story for reality itself. But it's just a story, and it's a story that's upheld by our beliefs. And, if enough of us believe that a little piece of colored paper has value, then that belief will uphold our monetary system. But what value is there in that little piece of colored paper? It's just the value of our belief. And this story that our culture communicates to us, one of its essential messages, and these messages go into our neurology, is that humans are separate from nature and separate from each other, and that safety is found in separation. This manifests at every level of our lives. You sit down to eat, and your chair is your place, and it defines your space just as your placemat does. And this is your space, which is separate from the space of those beside you. And if Sally wants the salt and it's on the other side, she better not reach through your space to get it. She can say, Philip, would you pass me the salt? And I'll safely convey it through my space to her space. We live with these invisible boundaries all around us. We want our houses to be on lots with strictly defined boundaries. And then we set the house back from that and put locks on all the doors and windows. And then we chop the inner space of the house up into rooms with locks and doors. And that's what we're creating in our homes, is a state that mirrors that of our bodies. So this huge story of the culture puts truths or putative truths into our bodies, and we start to live by them, and these are just fictions. But in our culture, they're dangerous fictions because they corrode our embodiment. So to take stock of those dangerous fictions, as I call them, refreshes our appreciation of what a journey to embodiment means. So I'd like to look at 8 cultural fictions that live in our bodies. And the first of these fictions is, you are alone. And of course, that's obvious to us. I mean, it's sad, but of course, we're all born utterly alone. Or at least that's the fiction. The reality is that everything you feel, everything you experience is a shared experience. Your heartbeat is felt in the room around you. Your thoughts, as they're felt, ripple into the world. There is no experience that is strictly private. And that violates our cultural belief. But look at what happens, when we're taken as seedlings and we're stuck into this pot of aloneness and we're told to grow there. So once you accept that you are alone, there's this cascade of effects where you understand that your experience is strictly private. And when that understanding settles into your being, your major task in life becomes to manage that private experience. And so you begin to supervise it. You want it to feel good. You want to arrange it so that it succeeds. So suddenly your primary relationship in life is your relationship to the self. It's like, sod the world, what matters is me. And you're in a divided state because, there's the part of you that is supervising and the part of you being supervised. So self-consciousness is this divided state that establishes the primary relationship in your life to be your relationship with the self, which requires a division, which is a form of disembodiment. We're isolated from the world. And we take self-consciousness to be normal because, of course, our job is to supervise, and how could we live without that supervision? This brings us to cultural fiction number 2. You should be independent. And again, of course you should be independent, and you should have financial independence and personal independence and independence of thought. The only problem with that is that independence is a fantasy. You cannot find one instance of independence in the whole of the cosmos. Nowhere. It just doesn't exist. Everything leans on everything. Everything depends on everything. So to chase independence is to chase a fantasy. And it's not a benign fantasy. When Joseph Campbell characterized the tyrant of mythology, he described the tyrant as the man of self-achieved independence. That's the tyrant, the man of self-achieved independence. Now, that actually sounds pretty good to us. Man of self-achieved independence, like a self-made millionaire, like this is really something. This is, in fact, indistinguishable from the American dream, the man of self-achieved independence. So we have a culture that is devoted to the aspirations of the mythological tyrant. You can't become independent however hard you try, but we feel independent. And the reason we feel independent is that you can desensitize yourself to the wholeness to which you belong. And that desensitization happens by holding tension in the flesh. It's like a surface tension of the body that separates us from the world. And after, if you had an hour-long massage and everything's softened and you get off the massage table and you feel a sense of ease and porosity and unity with the world, that surface tension has been, for the moment, softened. But as long as you hook your aspirations to the fantasy of independence, your ability to become truly embodied will be impaired. So that brings us to cultural fiction number 3. Your head should be in charge. This saturates our culture, this belief. If you're working in a corporation, you really want to end up in headquarters because that's where the action is. And you might get there if you have a good head on your shoulders, and you want to be clear-headed, and maybe you'll head up an initiative. And if you're in trouble, what should you do? Use your head. It's really interesting to me that a body count tells us how many dead people there are. A head count tells us how many living people there are. I mean, this is the sub text, the structure that underlies our understanding of the world. And we have this love affair with cars. I mean, you get into the car and you close the door and it just feels so good because it exactly mirrors how it feels to withdraw from the body into the head. And you look out at the world through the windshield, and it's just slightly remote the way you sit in the head and look at the world, and you're, that teeming union with the world through the body. You're distant from that, and the world looks like just slightly distant. And a car has 2 headlights, even though 3 headlights would illuminate the road better, but it would ruin the image because we have 2 eyes and this is a head. The car needs 2 headlights. We live with these cultural fictions to the point where we've not just normalized to them, they feel familiar and right. Now, if the head is in charge, embodiment will be a top-down experience. And that brings us to fiction number 4, up is good and down is bad. Again, it's so rampant in our culture, we don't notice it. But you say, oh, you're looking up today, or she's looking a little down, and we know what that means. Now, in another cultural context, he's looking up today could mean he looks kind of disconnected from the earth. What's wrong with them? She's looking a little down could mean she looks at peace with herself and at rest on the earth. But no, in our culture, up is good. And we know what that means. We know what it means if you're feeling a little low. We know what it means if you're feeling high as a kite. And we know life has its ups and downs, and we know exactly what that means. We know when things take a downturn. We know what that means. And you want to rise above it all. That's the aspiration of someone who's really living well. I always find it funny. The North Pole is up and the South Pole is down, and it's completely arbitrary. But the world was mapped by Europeans who live in their heads and wanted to be on top, and so they put the North Pole at the top and the South Pole at the bottom. It's entirely arbitrary. It's a fiction, but it's a fiction that matters to us because of these cultural values we've embodied. So, because up is good, everything we do is top down. I mean, our hierarchies are top down. We organize the body in a top down manner, and it's perfectly natural to us. And you could, every hierarchy we have in our culture has a leader who is called the head of that organization, even the church. Now, here's an institution that is based on faith and love and spirit. And the head is in charge, and that's absolutely necessary in our culture. We could call the head of the church the lungs of the church, because spirit and breath mean the same thing. But that's just wrong in our culture. We could call the head of the church the heart of the church. But again, that's wrong. The heart shouldn't lead. The head needs to lead. And so our energy, because we've internalized that up is good and down is bad, we distance ourselves from the intelligence of the pelvic bowl, which is the ground of our being. And, our energy gets higher and higher in the body when we're anxious or angry or excited, or when we need to make a decision. And you can feel that energy going higher and higher, because this is where it's at. This is where it's safe. This is what should be in charge. And that disembodiment cannot be avoided if you've internalized that up is good. So, our cultural intent to raise your consciousness. I'm thinking, here's a culture that is so resolutely in its head, it can't go any higher. So occasionally I'll give a talk and they'll say, what do you want to call your talk? And I say, well, why don't we call it lower your consciousness? When down is bad, there is a warning never to sink into the body's intelligence. And that brings us to cultural fiction number 5. You have 5 senses. And again, this is axiomatic. Of course we have 5 senses. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows what they are. Our 5 senses are a cultural artifact. And that's difficult to appreciate because, no, it's not a cultural artifact. It's physiology. You can see what the senses are. But you go to other cultures and you begin to realize to what an extent we have created this idea that we have 5 senses. So there's a culture called the Anglo-Ewe in Africa. They don't even have a word for senses. They have a word, sesilelame, which literally means feel at flesh inside, which is different from a sense, but it's as close as they come. And their primary sense is balance. And you think, well, that's kind of interesting because we talk about a sense of balance. We have a sense organ devoted to balance. Why don't we accept balance as a sense? There's something that our 5 senses have in common, which is this. The model of a sense is that a stimulus comes from the world, it crosses the boundary of the self, and it arrives on a receptor to be sent to the brain for interpretation. The boundary is a part of every sense, the boundary of the self that separates us from the world and holds us in independence. So every one of our senses upholds that boundary. Balance just doesn't. You're born into the pull of gravity. You're conceived into the pull of gravity. It's a felt relationship. There's no boundary. You can't, where would you draw a boundary between yourself and the earth that holds you to its breast? So balance doesn't reinforce our independence or separation. So we exclude it. But there's a deeper problem with this commitment to having five senses, which is that it will hamper your efforts to become fully embodied. So let's look at this Anglo-Ewe sense of sesalolame, feel at flesh inside. In essence, what it means is, they have a word for what it is to listen with the ear, but that's not real listening. Real listening is when you feel the sounds of the world in your body. Real sight is when you see the sights of the world and feel them in your body. The body is a resonator, and the more space there is in the body, the more room there is for the sensations and life of the world. So the Anglo-Ewe have been described by anthropologists as having a radical indeterminacy of the self. A radical indeterminacy of the self. Now, to us, that sounds like a living nightmare because of our boundary, because we want to know who we are. We want to establish that and have that clear. Well, there's this funny little choice you can make. You can be who you know yourself to be, or you can be present, but not both. Because the only way to be fully present is to open the spaciousness of the body to the present itself so that you feel it living within you. Feel at flesh inside. But our culture is committed to another realm. We don't have feel at flesh inside. We have think at head inside. And that feels so right to us. And that brings us to cultural fiction number 6. Intelligence is abstract reasoning. Well, we know intelligence is abstract reasoning because you give someone an IQ test and that's what you're testing for, their ability to reason in an abstract fashion. Now, it just so happens that our definition of intelligence was created by a faculty that happens to specialize in abstract reasoning. So it's a somewhat self-flattering definition to that intelligence in the head. It's not that abstract reasoning isn't a part of our intelligence, but to me, it's a narrow bandwidth on a massive spectrum. And then the task is to rename that spectrum. And to me, the renaming begins with sensitivity. And you consider that you can have a sensitivity to a child's tears. You can have a sensitivity to the sound of rain on a roof, to Mozart, to arithmetic relationship. You can have a sensitivity to the movement of a tree in the wind. Any sensitivity is a form of intelligence. Now, the nature of a sensitivity is that it's reactive. So the retina reacts to light. If it didn't, we wouldn't see. But that reactivity has to be grounded in order to become coherent. So that's the other side of our intelligence, is groundedness. So I would call intelligence grounded sensitivity. And there are people in our culture of whom it's said, she's just too sensitive. And I don't buy it for a minute. I don't think there's such a thing as too much sensitivity. I think what there is are sensitivities that haven't learned to ground themselves. And no wonder that's the case when you look at the culture we live in. Our very education system is devoted to leaving our kids ungrounded and desensitized. So if the nature of our intelligence is grounded sensitivity, the primary function of our intelligence is to come into felt relationship. Now, we don't need felt relationship in our culture. We want to know what things are and how they work. And when you know what things are, you don't need to feel them. I mean, I know that's a tree. Why would I need to feel it? We stereotype people we meet. Oh, he's old, or she's big, or whatever it might be, and we categorize and judge and know in that way that makes a felt experience unnecessary and cumbersome. But if we're living in a world, excuse me, that we don't feel, we are going to do damage to it without even realizing it. So what we are as a culture is very, very clever about known relationship and how things work and how to make them work better. But that cleverness is not intelligence, and we mistake it for intelligence. The reality is we've forgotten how to live intelligently. We have sacrificed our groundedness and our sensitivity in order to achieve and to do. And it's ruinous. And it makes embodiment unnecessary. In felt relationship is a matter of feeling your presence by coming into relationship with the world around you. You attune to the world. And that attunement is just like that globe that resonates when you strike it. The present resonates through us. And when you attune to the world in that way and resonate to it, you understand it with an intimacy that illuminates not just you. It illuminates the whole of the world and your relationships with it. Now, felt relationship, which is the true function of our intelligence, cannot happen without the body. And that brings us to cultural fiction number 7. Knowledge will save us. And, it's not often that people enunciate this, but this belief runs like an undercurrent through the whole of our culture. And we become compulsive about getting more knowledge, and we're driven to our devices and our screens for emails and texts and news feeds and tweets. Knowledge will save us. We just need more of it. So this idea that knowledge will save us, you need the least little question brought to bear on it, and it bursts like a bubble. Every major problem that we face in the world is a result of our gaining more knowledge. Pollution, pesticides, plastics filling the oceans and coursing through our bodies, burning of fossil fuels, climate change, species extinction. It's all the result of our knowledge. So it's clear that knowledge is lethal if it's not counterbalanced by something else. And to me, that something else is self-knowledge. But here again, self-knowledge has been misunderstood by our disembodied culture. We think of self-knowledge like a grocery list where, these are my favorite bands and these are my values, and this is what I want to be, when I'm really successful. Self-knowledge is not a grocery list. In fact, you don't even find self-knowledge by reaching down inside yourself. Self-knowledge is born of our true intelligence, which is the ability to come into felt relationship. So consider this. You're standing before a tree with the whole of your being, and you feel its being. And in that felt relationship, you are illuminated in a particular way. Or you look at a child playing with chalk on a sidewalk, and you're illuminated in a particular way. So the more deeply you come into felt relationship with the world around you, the more deeply you come to know yourself. And that's self-knowledge. And self-knowledge depends on the body. There is no felt knowledge. There is no self-knowledge without that felt relationship. And that brings us to cultural fiction number 8. Your intelligence belongs to you. Your intelligence is something you own. It's contained in the brain. You're in charge of it. This is a complete misunderstanding of the nature of intelligence. Intelligence is an emergent property. So what that means is intelligence isn't an aggregate of little bits of smartness being put together to create a big smartness. Intelligence happens when a unity achieves a coherence. And that coherence can manifest as a cell, and the cell achieves intelligence, or an organ, or an organism, or a colony, or a forest. A forest has intelligence. When we look at ant colonies, we see that intelligence at work. So there's a great researcher, Deborah Gordon, who looked at ant colonies and upended everything we know about ant colonies. No one's in charge of an ant colony. And yet the ant colony works this phenomenal harmony. There is an intelligence at work that cannot be found in any of the ants. It's not an aggregate of all the intelligences of the ants put together. It is an emergent property that guides that colony. And she tells a great story about watching an ant colony. And the ant colony began to build a turret. And that turret was built just before the monsoon season began. And the monsoons came and the rain didn't flood the colony. Now the ants building the turret didn't know they were building a turret. Just the right number of ants turned out to build the turret. So if there were too many, it would have been a chaos. If there were not enough, it wouldn't have been built. So that intelligence of the colony, those ants were guided. We don't live in just a space-time continuum. We live in a space-time-mind continuum. Intelligence is a field. It's not a computer in our heads. We are attuning to something to which we belong. So we're going to get to questions soon. I'm really looking forward to it. But I'd like to just talk for a minute about what I call the forgotten harmony. And that forgotten harmony lives in the world around us, and by dissociating from the body, we've dissociated from that harmony. And you see it in murmurations of starlings. You see it in the ants. You know, if an ant colony can be guided by that emergent intelligence, why not us? But essentially, by turning against the body, we have turned against nature. And if you consider what nature loves, it loves change, it loves diversity, it loves service. Everything is changing all the time. There's no day that is the same from moment to moment. It's changing. The nature loves diversity. There is a profusion. Nature is at play. It's not interested in doing the same thing over again. It wants to create more and different and abound in that diversity. And nature loves service. Everything that is born into service. The earthworm burrowing in the earth, the tree drinking in sunlight, everything, the shark in the ocean's depths, is born into service. Now, we turn against that in our disembodiment. We turn against our nature and nature itself. We resent change because it interferes with our plans. We fear diversity because we want order, and we serve only ourselves. So we've chosen order over harmony, and that's a grave wound. Mark, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, just one of the things I'm trying to take care of is the disembodiment of the audience. And I'm wondering if a 1 minute sort of move and stretch break might not be in order at this point. I've been enjoying your beautiful oration, and I'm looking at a lot of people sort of sat there looking. I'm wondering if a little bit of moving and stretching might not liven them up for the last part.
Yeah, I could even talk them through an exercise that involves standing up, which might do it. Why don't we stand up? I think that's a great idea. And give it a stretch. And what what I'd like you to do is just release your body to the in-breath and release your body to the out-breath. So the body knows how to breathe. If you can just release it to the breath and feel the breath like a wave traveling through the whole of it. And what I'd like you to do, just as you settle in that standing position, is to bring your attention gently to the energy that is in your body at the moment. And there may be emotional energy, like there may be a little pocket of anticipation, and just feel it as it is without needing it in any way to be different from what it is. There may be a little fuzzball of anxiety. And there's the physiological energy of your body. So there's the energy of your legs that teem with intelligence. And to just bring your awareness to that and feel it as it is without needing it to be different. There's energy that is on the move in your body, maybe like a mountain mist sliding across the landscape. There's energy in your head, so the energy of your thoughts, not the thoughts themselves, but the energy behind those thoughts. And to feel that energy as it is. So you begin to feel every aspect of the body's energy in all its specificity. It's like opening your eyes on a star field at night. And then gently, gently, give that field of energy permission to melt. And you feel it melting inside the body. And as it melts, you begin to feel it trickling down like water through pebbles. It melts and trickles down through the legs, through the torso, through the head. There's a cascade of energy washing down through the body. And you feel the first little trickle arrive on the soles of the feet. And it rests there and pools inside your feet. And you feel those pools grow and begin to rise inside the legs like a tide. And still you're noticing where energy may be held in the body, giving it the warmth of your love, feeling it melt under that influence and trickle down inside the body like water through pebbles. There's a cascade descending through the body, and those pools are nourished by that cascade. They're fed and they grow and rise inside the legs to the pelvic floor. And still the energy is descending. And that fluid energy rises to the top of the pelvic floor. And you feel it deeply, deeply settle. It comes completely to rest. And there is above that grounded energy a spaciousness to the body. And just feel it in its unblemished openness. And below that is the fluid energy that has come to rest on the earth. And feel it resting on the soles of your feet. Feel it resting on the earth. Feel it resting in the present. So you're holding in your body a sort of paradox of this spaciousness above and that grounded energy below. And this is what I understand as the body's energy being in coherence. And it mirrors our new definition of intelligence. Intelligence is grounded sensitivity. And there's that grounded energy at rest on the earth from the pelvic bowl down through the legs, and that sensitivity from the top of the pelvic bowl up through the body. And feel that coherence for a moment. Notice how you feel. Notice how the world around you feels. Linger with it. And then we'll get back underway. I'd love to open to questions, if there are any. I'd just like to say the crisis of disorder in the world is our disorder. The crisis of imbalance in the world is our imbalance. The disharmony around us is our disharmony. And we've demeaned and disconnected from the body's intelligence and find ourselves exiled from the body of the world. And there's a little quote I'd like to close with. It's a quote from my first book, New Self, New World. If you're divided from your body, you're also divided from the body of the world, which then appears to be other than you or separate from you, rather than the living continuum to which you belong. And I really believe that embodiment is absolutely necessary to rejoin that living continuum. Adrian, are you going to field questions?
Heidi said, talked about what I learned, experience from grounded intelligence opened me to collective intelligence.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you so much, Heidi.
Could you speak a little about how enlightenment in the mind has further stages involving the body and senses?
Yeah, so here's my take on enlightenment. I don't think we can achieve enlightenment. The present is enlightened, and you can surrender to the present. And the more deeply you surrender to the present, the more fully you partake in its enlightenment. But I don't see enlightenment as a personal achievement. I see it, and similarly, wholeness isn't a personal achievement. You can't achieve wholeness. How do you escape wholeness? You're held in wholeness the whole time. So all you can do is surrender to wholeness. And it's that surrender that for me is the true nature of embodiment.
Okay, I'm just going to go to Heidi, who's got a question now.
Sorry, something a bit practical, I guess. I didn't quite understand before. Is the grounding part more in the part of the body, like below the pelvic floor, and the sensitivity? I assume it's all over, but it felt to me a bit like you had compartmentalized them a bit, which I thought that can't be. He's against separation, so I must have misunderstood.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. There's no separation, but there are different realms of intelligence in the body. The body's intelligence has a geography to it, and the higher our energy goes in the body, the more it becomes an impediment to the present. At least that's my experience. So if I'm holding energy in my body here, it's a form of resistance to the present. So my sense is that when my energy drops down to the soles of my feet, and I have a sense of it resting on the earth, that sensitizes me. It's not a lack of sensitivity. Just as when there's spaciousness above the body, it enables me to ground the experience of the present as it happens. So it's not a separation, but the body has realms. It has a geography, and to become truly embodied, it really helps to recognize that geography and work hand in hand with it.
Yeah, I know you can help me with this sense of this anger, this rage that is coursing through me these days that is very embodied, and it's not all mine. I mean, I know some of it is self-created and reactive, but it feels like the cry of what is happening in our deep, deep disconnection with one another, with the planet, with, all of the crazy disorganization that's going on. And I don't know what to do with this. You're bringing back to, the grounded sensitivity in myself. And I see that. I see the importance of it. And yet there's this big overtaking, big anger energy, and that seems to want to go somewhere. Does this make any sense to you?
Yeah, it does. I think that anger is sacred. It's not, we're told anger is a negative emotion. No. It's an embodied reaction.
Yeah.
And it wants to carry you. It is activating you. It's activating the nation. And who knows where that activation will lead, but to understand that anger as sacred I'm hoping will shift it in a way that enables you to embrace it and live it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's so good to see you.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Well,
I'd love people to check out my website, which is just philipshepard.com. I'd love you to read my books. There's New Self, New World, the first one, and Radical Wholeness, the second one. It's been a joy participating in this. Thank you to everyone.
Some ways to get more, to give back, and to get more involved now. So the biggest request I have would be to share the podcast with your friends, people that you think would really enjoy it. Email it to them, put it on your social media, tell them about it, old school. Really appreciate that. Equally, if you want to support us financially, you can go to Patreon. That's patreon.com/embodiment podcast and give us $1 an episode. And I'd say they're well worth $1. So that's less than £1 if you're in UK-ish. So yeah, please go there. On the embodifacilitator.com website is where this is hosted. If most people I think listen to for iTunes. iTunes, we'd certainly appreciate a review. The way iTunes works means that a review means more people will find it. iTunes regards it as more important for searches. So even a couple of sentences review really does help as a little thank you to us. And if you want to go to embodifacilitator.com, you can see the actual, links to the sites. There's comments on there. The Facebook group tends to be where people discuss things. So if you go to put in the Embodiment podcast into Facebook, there's a page which is relatively quiet and a group which does have some discussion on. So I will reply to things personally there. So also on embodifacilitator.com website, there's all sorts of freebies there. There's videos, there's free ebooks, there's ebooks you can buy. And of course, there's our newsletter list. If you want to stay in touch and learn about things like the Embodied Facilitator course and our next Embodied Yoga Principles teacher training, then go to that website and you'll see a little pop-up and you can get the newsletter through there. Okay, so I think they're the main ones. Tell your friends, pay us some money on Patreon, give us a review on iTunes, send us your email if you want to be on the newsletter list, and get involved on the Facebook there. Bit long. Pick whatever you like that works for you. Until next time, welcome home to the body.